What's happening, everybody? It's your man, Dame D, NYDC, two mics up. Be back, and we're coming back, with the second part of, Black History Month series, that we like to call Real Talk. We're trying to have real talk, real conversations, not from necessarily a historical standpoint or talking about figures and different events that have happened, throughout Black history. But I'm trying to have real talk and real conversations with people about real topics that really impact us as a community. And today I'm gonna talk about something that I'm gonna short term it as RID. Some of you like, damn, that's a real strange uh acronym or real short to use, but I want you to think about representation, identity, and diversity. Because that's really what that stands for. Today's guest that's going to be joining me on the mic is really going to help dive into it from an educational aspect. Today's guest is she is this deep in the skill set of education. She's a consultant. She's also a podcast host. This sister is really well renowned, and I think we talked behind scenes about how God kind of knows what's supposed to happen and how things are supposed to take place even before you even realize it. And I have to agree, because that's how today's conversation really came about. And without me, carrying on, I'm going to bring to the mic and to the stage today's guest. And thank you so much for joining me today, everyone. Please welcome Ann Hlabangana-Clay. And we just was going through, I gotta see you. And y'all are probably trying to figure out why we thumbing it up. Ann and I were behind scenes and we were talking about, where she's from and her history. And I'm going to go ahead and first, Ann, before we get into your name, because I know a lot of people like thumbs up, please introduce yourself and give us a little background history about who you are. And I'm really excited to have you here today. So please go ahead and introduce yourself.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me today. As Damon said, I'm Ann Hlabangana-Clay, and I'll unpack my name in just a moment. But I currently serve in the role at the Delaware Department of Education, where I oversee educator equity as well as recruitment. So on my feet, I'm always wearing roller skates, obviously, right? Trying to work on this teacher shortage in the state of Delaware. However, my background, my career started as a teacher, as an assistant teacher, actually, in Philadelphia, moving into a master teacher role in Chester Upland School District in Chester, Pennsylvania. And then, as I had my daughter, we moved down to Delaware, and I transitioned here in roles again as a teacher. I was a teacher more than anything else in my career. And then I went into the role as an instructional coach, wanting to support teachers. And that continued right through the pandemic. And bless their hearts, that was the best role of service that I could be in education at that time. And then I went into administration for a short period of time here in Delaware. And now, as I said, working with the Department of Education. So the bottom line is, education is my world. Children first, educators next, right?
Yep.
Administrators I support as well. But, we must think of it in that order. Our children are our future. And of course, those are the ones that we work for each and every day. So loving the topic, of course. I know I'm not going to jump in there, but I do love the topic. I'm educator equity, but obviously, rooting for student equity as well. Yeah. So when you talk about representation, not just our state, we're neighboring states.
Yes.
our state, but across the country,
Yes.
we're having deeper conversations about what that looks like in our classrooms,
Mm-hmm.
our school buildings, etc.,
Yes.
for our babies. And and of course, diversifying the teaching workforce,
Oh,
right?
that's huge. That's
That
really
is huge.
important.
That's a
That's
lot of
huge.
the work that we're doing, like I said, across the country.
Mhm.
So, but anyway, just to unpack my name.
Please, because this is listen, like this is really great because myself, we were talking about it. My wife and I were talking about it. We were totally off uh, where we thought it was from. But and go ahead, please share that.
Yes. So it's pronounced Hlabangana, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Americanized version is Hlabangana. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people do associate it with the Spanish sounds.
Right.
And so, but my father is from Zimbabwe.
Wow.
And so our
Wow.
heritage, I was able to keep that as part of my, when I got married, as a
Mm-hmm.
hyphenated name. My children, of course, don't do not have the name. They're just Clay,
Hey,
but they're Hlabanganas at heart,
I
right?
know that's right. I know that, and I can look. You and I can have a separate conversation just on the hyphenation and
Oh, indeed.
culture and how things
Yes.
evolve. But that's
Yes.
a separate conversation that we're going to get back to because I want to get back to today's conversation and it's
Mhm.
interesting. And like I said, early on, and you and I talked about, the Lord knows,
Oh,
um,
yes.
you know, how things are going to work out before you do.
That's
And
right.
it's interesting finding out, your background, your
Mhm.
culture, and where your roots come from being here in America.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I want to talk about like advocating for self-representation,
Oh,
right?
yes. Oh, yes.
And and this is just my personal opinion. There is a misrepresentation a lot of times when for some of us, they have a feel that we should be identified as African American,
Mhm.
Black American, and really, before we really dive into, I want to get your opinion. Like,
Yes.
what do you feel about is there a misrepresentation of using that African American title or Black American? What's your thoughts on that?
Right. There's a lot to unpack with that.
Hmm.
And being the fact that I just shared with you that
Hmm.
obviously my roots, right, my direct
Right.
roots are
Right.
of African descent,
Right.
using that terminology makes more sense for me than someone
Yes.
who is of Caribbean descent who
Right.
may have, French connections
Right.
or might have other connections. But I think one of your follow-up questions is going to be about using the terminology black, right?
Hmm.
And that as a culture. So I think that the most important thing is that we not generalize.
Hmm. Hmm.
That's the whole point, right? You
Right.
and I are both on this call.
Right.
We have different roots,
Right. Right.
potentially different roots.
Right.
So we can't be lumped together, is what I
Hmm.
guess my point is.
Right.
But we are of a people, right?
Right.
That
Right.
should be band together, and I
Right.
think that is the most important part. So I guess it's, to me personally, African American makes the most sense for me.
Hmm.
Um, I think that a lot of people and people have moved. There's been a movement, right, for
Right.
decades
Right.
towards blacks and black Americans,
Hmm.
and that's okay. I mean, I'm
Right.
I'm fine with both personally.
Right.
Um, I think that I'm thinking of phrases like "black is beautiful," right?
Hmm. Hmm.
365 black, right?
Right.
That's culture
Right.
and not necessarily defining my race.
Right.
Does
And,
that make sense?
and no, it makes total sense. And see,
Uh-huh.
this is where I struggle, and
Sure.
sometimes some of my friends and I we talk about it,
Right.
about African Americanism or Black culture,
Uh-huh.
and like part of my struggle is and I'm just being honest. So me, being multicultural,
Yeah.
I am a Black American. My
Sure.
family has traced our history back to Shaka Zulu. We have been traced
Okay. Nice.
back to when we came up, when we were sold.
All
We were
right
traced.
now.
So part of me, I want to really stay rooted in my Africanism, if you
Stay
will, right?
rooted.
I want to stay
Mm-hmm.
rooted. So that is
Mm-hmm.
part of who I am. But I'm also a Latino. I'm also Puerto Rican. I'm also Native American.
Absolutely.
I'm all, I have white and Irish in my family. So I'm
Yes.
multicultural, But part of me, I'm stuck, and I get stuck in part. See, because I've
Hmm.
talked to some of my African brothers. I have friends who are African,
Oh yes. Oh yes.
that really don't view me as an African because I don't have
Hmm.
that necessarily. I'm not there anymore. I
Interesting.
don't have that tie to the foundation, right? So I get that. I can
Mm.
I can get that
Hmm.
because they're still there in the struggle, and this is where I
Sure.
think
Amen.
where the pivot is, and I really
Hmm.
had to understand. So now I'm here in America
Interesting.
as a
Interesting.
Black American because
Hmm.
now I get the tie, but black as a Black American, what is our culture? You know
Well,
what I'm
see,
saying?
that's it. That's it. There,
Y-
that's about
y-
2 or 3 episodes
right, and I
to
think
answer that. Hmm.
that's where my struggle lies because I want to identify, but some of my brothers back in the day, they're like, no, you over in America, and you really, you as those who are there now haven't really done anything for us back here,
Ooh, 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 ooh. Mm-mm.
and and
Mm. That's
you,
a whole that is, but is that about race, culture, or anything? I'm just asking.
well, and that's the whole thing. Like
That's my question.
even within us, then so then we still are
Mhm.
breaking down or putting on these walls or barriers that were put upon us
Right,
from our
that's it.
captors, right? So that's
That's
where the
it.
struggle
That's
for
the
me
struggle.
is. And
Mhm.
like I don't know where do we make that break that bond or break that disconnect? And how
Right,
do we
that's what
get
I
to the point?
was wondering. I'm sorry.
I know because I'm with you and
I'm thinking
I'm
as
just
you're
throwing
I'm
out.
thinking as you're saying it because it's a real point.
Mhm.
Not for us because we're not the ones thinking that way, right?
Right,
But
right.
it's important for us to embrace, and that's your whole topic today, right?
Yes,
Not just
yes.
the representation, the diversity of thought.
And I think
That
we should
right
have this.
there, right? We need to embrace the
Brace.
fact that there are divergent thoughts or differing thoughts,
Mhm.
and it's not about, and that's where let's think old school, right?
Mhm.
About respect, right?
Yes,
About
right.
I don't have to agree, but I in the
Yes.
case I do agree how they feel, but I
Right.
don't have to agree in order to respect your
Fact it.
opinion
Yeah.
or
Right.
your thought process. And I think
Right.
that's where I'm coming from with that as you're sharing it, because we haven't lived it, right? Even myself, I've lived
Right.
it. I was born here. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
I lived my whole life in an American world, which is completely different from
Different.
living in Zimbabwe, South Africa,
Mhm.
Kenya. Any of the countries of on the motherland, and so it's still not my experience, right?
Right, right. And,
Interesting. Go
and
ahead.
that's why I said I just wanted to bring it up because I think again, and
Mhm.
when you have I try to use this space and this platform to really
Yes,
have this type of discussions because
sure.
there are so many different things that like I said, doing this that I was hit with in conversation. That I
Hmm.
think people should really look at and be willing to listen to. Because, like you said, we don't have to agree. We can agree to disagree,
Absolutely,
but
absolutely.
there are valid points, and that's why I say if you can walk
Mhm.
away really just saying, man, I never thought of it that way,
And that's it.
or I
Mhm.
never looked at it from that perspective. I
Right.
think if it change your narrative, and then it becomes on you as the individual. Well, what can I do to maybe change that scenario to bridge that gap? Because I think that's
Yes.
really important. Because I really lead into on the show I talk about my favorite historical figure
Uh-huh.
was Marcus Garvey
Yes.
and all of the things that he did 100 years ago,
Mhm.
with engineering, shipping,
Oh, yeah.
manufacturing, and he made really pan Africanism, or
Oh, yes.
it
Mhm.
was a
Mhm.
global thing. And at the time, I want to say he had almost 16 million followers. But we live in a world today. We
Mm.
have Black Lives Matters, all this social media, but they only have like 4 or 5 million, and
How about that?
it just blows my mind. So our
Right.
disconnect has gotten
But
so
it
much broader
mm.
in 100 years,
Mm.
and it just blows my mind. And I'm
Yes.
going to ask you too, like, was that a byproduct maybe of slavery?
Mm.
In your opinion, like as an educator, like did slavery
Now
and
that's
the
some thought.
assimilation
I
play a
hope
part
you're ready.
in it? Please talk about
I
it.
hope you're ready.
Mm.
So let's think of it from an educational, because it is education based. Excuse me. And living, originally from Pennsylvania, coming down into Delaware, you learn so much more, right? As you move across states about education, about the impact of laws, for the southern states,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And even though the northern, right, cross
Right.
over to Pennsylvania, it
Yep.
still was an impact.
Right.
So the bottom line is, there were a few things. So there used to be a time, right,
Mm-hmm.
a century ago, when you're talking, when educators, right, were
Mm-hmm.
as respected and pouring out knowledge, right,
Yes. Yes.
to the whole entire community, whether you went to school or not.
Not. That's
It
right.
got fed back, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I was the student, I went home and I told my parents what I learned that day,
That's right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Who may not have had the opportunities to be in school, but now
Mm-hmm.
they were getting that knowledge. Of course, the generations after, respected just like doctors at
Right.
that time. Because of laws that were put into place, there were, it's difficult to say. It actually is really sad to think about that. But laws were put into place, and what happened were teachers of color
Mm.
were demoted,
Mm-hmm.
which meant your salary went down, which
Right.
meant you. I mean, we're not talking about yesterday. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Right.
Yesterday. And so therefore you wanted out of the profession, right? Because you
Mm.
couldn't afford to be in the profession.
Mm.
You lost your promotion, or whatever, you've lost your status,
Yes.
or you're demoted. So you have
Right.
all of those pieces. And then of course, now I'm teacher A, right? I'm out. I get replaced by
Mm-hmm.
somebody very different from me,
That's right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We haven't been able to fix that yet. And I'm not just
Mm.
talking about here, in our state. I'm talking about
Across
nationally.
the country. Yeah. Across the country.
You look
Mm-hmm.
at the data, woo,
Mm.
you look
I
at
could.
the data and see how many students, talking about representation,
Mm-hmm.
how many students of color there are
Mm-hmm.
in our country in comparison, or let me do this way, in
Right.
comparison
Crashing too.
to how many teachers of color there are in this country.
Mm. Mm.
It'll blow your mind.
Mm. You know, it
This
does
is
blow my
not
mind.
new. This is not new.
You know, and when you put it next, see, and this again is mind blowing for me. So I don't have a young child anymore. You know, thank
Okay,
goodness.
sure.
Right. So thank goodness. My graduated, she's an
Yes,
adult now, doing great things.
that's awesome.
Um, but you don't, when you're not in it anymore. Because I was
Mm-hmm.
very engaged. My wife and I
Mm-hmm.
were very engaged in our child's
Oh, sure.
curriculum, and a lot of times they knew. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
don't let Mr. Cunningham come up here. 'Cause, I mean, I was involved. A lot of time
That's right.
my daughter would call, my please, you come, don't let dad come. So and again though, it is that way because a lot of times they're
But
not
in
used
a
to seeing.
positive way,
Right, we're
absolutely.
in a positive way because and a lot of times though they weren't used to seeing this.
Oh,
The
how
the
about
male
that?
role
Mm-hmm.
in a
Mm-hmm.
in the black household
Oh,
or our
yes.
community is almost non-existent. Um,
Unfortunately, yes.
Unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
but you're right because I didn't really realize the magnitude,
Mm-hmm.
and this is really the stressors that really our kids come home with. Now that you mentioned, it makes me think, why they are isolated, pinpointed, pretty much because again,
Mm-hmm.
already being the minority, but now you're really the minority because you don't have a teacher or someone that looks like you that
Right.
has and I want to be careful how I say this because it's but
Oh
they
no.
have an understanding
Sure.
of what this is for you in America, right? And may
Mm-hmm.
show a little more patience because it makes me think back to when I was child how those are the teachers that actually stand out more to me
Okay. Okay.
because
Right.
they had patience and time. Not like I was a bad kid or anything like that,
No,
but sometimes
absolutely.
we
Mm-hmm.
we struggle in different things. Like math was my worst subject.
Sure.
I I could care less about math. First of all I want to do, can I add
No
my money?
comment on
Right,
my end.
right. Can I add my money? Can I divide my money? Can I subtract? That
Yes.
I wasn't going to be an architect. That wasn't my thing.
Right.
But
That's all right.
the math teachers that stood out to me were the ones who looked like me because they took the time.
Wow.
They
Mm-hmm.
understood that. Hey, look, Damon was. I was look. I was a pretty good student. I was
Yes.
pretty
Yes.
good at 95% of other stuff. That
Mm-hmm.
5%, they were like, oh,
Sure.
you struggle, and they sat with me and they
Yes.
worked with me.
Yes.
And now, when I listen to how you explain it.
Mm-hmm.
Now I understand why when I hear certain, parents now talk about the school systems, the
Mm-mm-mm.
miscommunication, I guess you will, that it seems
Sure.
like the parents and the teachers don't really vibe and jive and communicate. So I want to ask then, like, how do we
Mhm.
resolve that, or what can parents do, or what should they be doing to try to help their children? Uh,
Mhm.
in today's situation with the teaching and how it's changed or really had more of an impact on us now. What should the
Sure.
parents do?
Sure. So really it's two parts.
Hmm.
And both in both scenarios, we all have to work on ourselves. Does that make
Right.
sense? So
Right.
in the education world, we have to work on ourselves, right?
Hmm.
How are we coming across to students? How are we coming across to families? How are we going out of our way to be empathetic, right?
Hmm.
And to give them knowledge about what, like you said, right? Maybe right, there's just various parts of working on self. The other piece, though, I think is really important, and again, this comes out of the what I just spoke about, right?
Hmm.
There are side effects to everything, right?
Right.
Some are good side effects and some are bad side effects. And what I described to you is let's say 2, 3 generations back, right?
Right. Right.
Depending on your age.
Right. Right.
You're 2, 3 generations back of you lost the teacher that looked like you,
Mm.
or you lost, or you grew up in this time where there wasn't somebody who looked like you or who was supporting you. And it doesn't mean that teachers that are not of color
Right.
don't care about students. I don't want that to be the message, right?
Right. Right.
It's just like you said, sometimes when someone looks like you, they go out of their way to be
Hmm.
more supportive, right?
Right. Right.
Extra time. So anyway, so now we're 2, 3 generations back. That was my experience.
Hmm. Hmm.
I told that to when my children. Okay, I like to use myself an example. So now I'm my grandmother. How's that?
Right.
I'm my grandmother, and that was my experience. Well,
Right.
when I had my daughter or children, then I was, when they talked about school, I was bad mouthing it, not in a
Right.
disrespectful way, but
Right.
just like
Right.
I didn't like it because my experience was so
Totally
awful.
different. Yeah. Hmm.
Now you're 2, 3 generations down the way. You see what I'm saying? That gets
Hmm.
passed on. That's the negative side effect
Right.
of sometimes change, right?
Yes. Yes.
Sometimes change. So the bottom line is so that's important for parents to work on themselves. That's what I'm saying.
Hmm.
It's a
Hmm.
two-way street,
It is a two-way street.
right?
Yep.
Be careful what you say about teachers,
Right.
about your students, or unless something is really off.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? And sometimes it is. Sometimes it is off. And like you said, when you were a parent and your child needed you to be down there at school for whatever academic, social, whatever it was, you were there.
Without
And
question.
that's it. Just
Hmm.
and I, a lot of parents, and I think that I say that as
Hmm.
an educator, I have seen parents. I've been able to reach parents. I've had no problem. You understand
Hmm.
what I'm saying? With parents, they might be at work and can't get there, but they'll
But
pick
they'll
up that
pick up that's
phone
right.
or they'll whatever. And so I think that's a misconception that unfortunately some educators have portrayed,
Uh-huh.
that families are not involved,
That's right.
parents are not involved. That's a hard message.
Yeah.
That's
It
a
really is.
and if it's not true, then let's
Hmm.
not do that, right?
Hmm.
And there's always cases where things are different. So yeah, I hope that was helpful to you.
No, it was. No, it really was. Because
That
'cause-
families. Oh, sorry.
no, go
Just
ahead. Go ahead. No.
I just think that it's a two-way street, right?
Hmm.
If you're feeling like and sometimes it's just a matter of saying to the teacher, I'm getting this vibe from you that you're
Hmm.
not receptive to what I'm saying, or you're
Right.
not empathetic, or you're not, sometimes they need to hear it, right?
That's right.
Tired.
That's right. That's what.
It's a good profession, right? But it's like anything else, right? With a doctor, I equate it to doctors all the time because I want people to understand just how serious education is. A doctor, when they get tired, they need to take a
Take a
day
day
off
off. That's
or
right.
something because their bedside manner
That's right.
is crucial. And it's the same for teachers. That's why self-care is being, pushed even from the, the national
For
is a
to,
union,
that's right.
like making sure that teachers are aware you have to take care of self because of
Mm.
course a half cup, excuse me, a half filled cup could go either way, right?
That's right.
So you don't want it to be empty. You want to be able to pour out of a full
That's right.
cup at all
Keep
times.
pouring. Keep pouring.
And so so like I said, it's having those conversations. I'm feeling like it's this, or I'm feeling
Mm-hmm.
like it's this. Let the teacher explain their thoughts. And if they are coming across the wrong way, then guess what? Then they will fix it because
That's
now
right.
it's been brought to their attention.
Attention.
You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Yep.
And it's vice versa with families.
Right.
Families are tired too, right? Working 1, 2, 3,
Woo,
8 jobs. I'm just being
woo.
real, right?
No,
This
real talk.
economy
Yeah.
is rough today.
Yeah.
So they're working, they're trying their best to be involved, like you said, in their child's life. And so they just might have, it might have come off
It
wrong.
might have come off wrong. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, and that's important to know, but
Yes.
but you have to stay in and have conversation and
That's it.
try to create a dialogue
Yes.
that you both
Yeah.
that you both receive and can build on. I
That's
think
it.
that's the most important part. But you also talk about, with education,
Mm-hmm.
and you talked about even with teachers how things change,
Oh, yes.
your status, when they start shifting in and bringing in other educators of
Mm-hmm.
different backgrounds and different things, and how
Sure.
sometimes you're demoted. And we're talking about economics here, the
Oh, yes.
diversity of economics,
That's
right?
it.
And the economic status of our community, uh
Mm-hmm.
some would want to say that we're doing better today.
Hmm. Okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
I kind of question that. I feel like that's a false narrative. Um, and I'm just interested from an educational standpoint. You may have seen or come across numbers different from a economic background, but where do you see the status of our community, the Black community today?
From an economic
Economic
standpoint,
standpoint,
right?
yes. Mm-hmm.
I immediately think of Black Wall Street.
Mm, mm,
And I think of so many other examples, right, across the country, 100 plus, right? I'm just
mm-hmm.
saying years ago, and maybe I'm off by a couple decades, but I'm pretty sure 100 plus years ago. Um, where and right or wrong, right? I
Right,
mean, they were communities that were created because they had to be self-sustainable,
right.
right? I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the innovation of it, obviously fantabulous, right?
Right, right.
But because we had to sustain ourselves as our own community,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's really how all of those, examples of wealth grew, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what is that? So what's my point? My point is that I don't know about you, but I'm not saying we're not individually wealthy, right? In this
Right,
country,
right,
as a unit,
right.
I don't see it. I don't see the
Mm-hmm.
same. And unfortunately, and this goes into more social than economic, but it all ties together.
Yes.
Where are we with, like, we do a lot of, this is Black owned business, support our
Right.
Black owned business. We do a lot of that now,
Right.
right?
Right.
But it's not the same.
Right.
Not the same. And so our wealth, individual
Mm-hmm.
wealth is spread,
Mm-hmm.
right, within our own community and other community for whatever
What a
reason.
mm-hmm.
Um, and so I have to say that Black Wall Street and that time period
Mm-hmm.
was better economically for us as a people.
Yes.
Now let me put that caveat there.
Please,
There's
please.
always
Yeah.
something that's right. Why isn't there still a Black Wall
That's
Street?
what I want to know. That's what
There
I
we go.
wanted. There we go.
Well, I can tell you why.
Okay.
Television, you got to watch your PBS.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, why we don't have? Unfortunately, it was frowned upon
Mm.
by those who don't look like us, who weren't part of Black Wall Street,
Mm-hmm.
when those
Mm-hmm.
other communities that particularly in the South, right?
Right.
Particularly in the West. Of
Right.
course, the North, we were more advanced because we didn't have didn't have slavery.
Right. Right.
However, when you think about the real big pockets, it was out
Mm-hmm.
in the West and it was in the South. But the bottom line is, um, burning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Destruction. I mean,
Yeah.
these are words that are coming, right? Am I not
Right. No,
right? Of what happened
these
to
are things that happen to it. Right. This
things
is what
that
happened. Right.
happen
Mm-hmm.
to,
Right.
those communities. And, you know, that creates a sense of fear.
Yeah.
That's a
Yeah.
whole, like I said, I love this conversation because, like I said, we could be talking
You,
several episodes on it.
on multiple things, on multiple
Right,
levels. Yes.
exactly. But
Mm-hmm.
it created a sense of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Not that the innovation wasn't there, not that
Right.
the wealth couldn't be regenerated.
Right. Right.
I mean,
Right.
the people, yes, some of the people, unfortunately, were no longer there, right?
Right.
Because they were burned, or, the destruction, took them out. However, that fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because even for, look, think of, I'll speak for myself. I can't
Okay.
speak for you.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not a risk taker,
Right.
right? That takes
Right.
risk.
Risk. Right.
That
Right. Right.
takes risk, right? But if there's somebody, my husband or my neighbors, or in my community, my immediate community was like, let's go for this. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? I think that personally, my fear factor of
Mm-hmm.
what I know from history
Right.
prevent me from moving forward. I'm just being
Mm.
transparent. Do you understand what I'm
No,
saying?
I totally understand because it really leads to the question. I don't mean to cut you off because
No, it's okay.
it's so real though, because
Mhm.
then that really prevents us from being able to actually close the economic gap, really, if you think about it. Because I've asked this question for so long,
Sure.
and it just dawned on me, and the point that you just made.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many of us, like you said, individually have
Yes,
achieved levels of success.
absolutely.
And I only think about some people that I know, even in what you just said though, if your community around you
Mm-hmm.
decided, let's move forward,
Mm-hmm.
let's say
Right.
with another Black Wall Street,
Sure.
Black Wall Street, Virginia, whatever it may be,
Right.
there would be some that would be hesitant because of all that they've known,
Mm-hmm.
some of the fear that comes
Oh,
from
yes.
the outside,
That's it.
that past history of hatred of that would
Mm-hmm.
really stop them from committing
Yeah.
to evolving. And it did, because we a lot of times I put it the crab in the barrel syndrome, but no, I think really at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, what
Mm-hmm.
you just said though shines a bigger light as
Mm-hmm.
well. We act like crabs in the barrel, but it's fear.
That's
It's
it.
fear of committing.
Of committing. That's it.
It's the
And
commitment.
losing. I
And
mean,
then
because it's a risk.
yes,
It's a gamble.
yes,
And it
yes,
was 100 years ago. You
yes,
understand
yes,
what I'm saying?
yes,
But they didn't know what was gonna, not
yes,
that they did not know, but they
yes,
took the risk anyway.
yes.
And it
Mhm.
was successful for however long it
Right,
lasted,
right,
right?
right.
But now it's like,
Yeah.
does history repeat itself?
And it tends to generally,
Right? Mm-hmm.
and usually though, but that history is generated or comes from those in power, who
Well, there
have
we
some
go.
power over
Mm-hmm.
another segment or
Sure.
group, and
Yes.
that history does and has, as we've
Mhm.
seen,
Oh,
repeated
yes.
itself.
Oh,
So
yes.
I'm glad
And
you.
particularly now, you really brought up something now. In the last 6+ years,
Hmm.
7 years. Yes. I mean, the culture, let's say like that, the American culture of instilling fear, anxiety, separatism, all that, has been very prevalent. So it creates for a lot of people. I mean, I don't think it's just people of color. I think that people, and people who identify in differently, differently sexually, et cetera,
et cetera, et cetera,
et cetera, right?
Mm-hmm.
Various groups, I think, are feeling the same thing, and so, how does anybody come together? I mean, I'm just, for maybe correct me because I haven't tuned into the news. I mean, I haven't even heard of a Black Lives movement, except for unfortunately something, unfortunately in Memphis just occurred.
Right, right.
But I think that people are scared. I'm just going to be transparent.
Yeah, and it's funny you brought, because
come together.
I'm going to talk about, that's a conversation that I'm working on in the coming weeks to talk about, because there's been a shift, and I think how we respond to these, I'm just going to call it sometimes blatant murder and atrocities that are happening to the men and women of color here in this country.
Oh yes,
but we'll talk about that. But yeah, there's been a huge shift.
Take us off the path.
Yeah. So I do want to move then, but thank you for that, because that was really poignant, and it really struck a nerve for me, and I have to do so. I have to rethink how I thought about that. But I do want to ask too,
yes,
we also live in an age where the actual age diversity of our group of people has retained, and I think one of the things that has changed the most to me, in my opinion, I've talked about it here on the show in the past, is how we communicate with our youth, and vice versa.
Oh yes.
We're not, how do we get onto some type of equal footing where we can talk to each other, not talk at each other, talk past each other. There's so much disrespect and hatred nowadays. Like, how do we get back to that just conversation between the youth and our more sage group of people?
Yes. Well, since I'm in that sage group, I have a little more experience with that. No, but let me tie it back into education, because we're seeing it in our classrooms, in our school buildings, that disconnect that you mentioned earlier in communication, and part of it is establishing or reestablishing a true respect for one another, right? The bottom line is, I am older, I have more knowledge and possibly more wisdom, right, in some areas. However, there's a lot to be learned from our millennials and our high school students and on down, right? I mean that, right? So, and not just technology, right?
That's right.
We have to stop pigeonholing the,
that's right.
Oh, okay, when I have a trouble with my laptop, I need to go there. No, seriously, we need to reestablish a respect between one another, as far as that, right? That we all come to the table with something, but more importantly, those conversations, like you said, it's tough. And not because of age, it's just tough because of the age we're in and the times we're in. Again, you've had the pandemic, 10 years. Let's just give 10 years, of disconnect between various generations and age groups. And for different reasons. Some of it is because of technology, right? Our younger folks, right? They like QR codes. I've learned that with recruitment. I want you to connect with me. I am not going to wait for, meaning they are not going to wait for me to write down my, my information or put it in your phone even these days.
That's
they would like a QR code to go right soup into their contacts, and guess what? And it's been very successful.
That's right.
So we have to come together as far as, what do you need? What do I need to be successful?
Right.
And it's again a two-way street. There's no one-way street with this, right? It's got to be a two-way street.
I agree. I think for me to even carry that out a little further, I think the SAGE group needs to really be willing to accept change.
Yes,
Because
yes.
sometimes we're many of us are caught up, and well, this is how we did it. This is
Right.
how it was done.
Sure.
And understanding that some change is good.
Mm-hmm.
And by sharing your wisdom and knowledge
Yeah.
and marrying that with today's technology, the
Oh,
energy
yeah. Oh,
that
yes.
that the youth have today, these millennials, you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
The
yes.
energy they out there, and I think you have to take a step back and
Mm-hmm.
really work to marry that and to make things happen, because I think that's where we are. uh we're short right now, and
Sure.
lacking our continued development and passing of
Yes.
the baton to that group, because
Mm-hmm.
really at the end of the day, this next group is going to really take care of you and I.
That's
you
it.
know
That's it.
but we have to be able to transfer that knowledge, like you said, some of the things that we may have a little more experience in,
Sure.
uh
Absolutely.
knowledge in. We might have to, like I said, just take a step back though, and be willing to listen and meet them where they are. Sometimes you have to meet.
That's it. Mm-hmm.
I think that's really important in the development of our community.
No,
um
I agree. Absolutely.
mhm.
Like you said, meeting them where they are,
Right.
meeting us where we are,
We
but
are right.
that mutual respect has to
Respect.
occur first,
Yes. I
right? In
mm,
order to be open to,
right.
right? Because I think sometimes we see things. I'm going to use another technology example just because it's really clear.
Hmm.
But sometimes we uh, form opinions and
Yeah.
then place judgment
Yeah.
and
Yes.
sometimes even shame
Yes.
on
Yes.
our youth because
Hmm.
we don't get it, right?
Right.
So let's use texting. When
Hmm.
texting, like we'd see somebody sitting at the table, right? And we're like, well, I'm right here, or not I'm
Right.
right here, but why don't you call
Call
them?
me.
Why don't
Right.
you walk down the street
Right.
and talk to them, right?
Right.
That's placing judgment,
It's
and
a
then like I
stereotype.
said, shame, it's a stereotype.
Stereotype. Hmm.
And the bottom line is they're still communicating with
Right.
somebody.
Right. That's just how
When
they
they're
do it.
not communicating with somebody,
But
that's where we need to be
that's
concerned.
what you should be concerned.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right. But no, but I think that, and then vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Well, why do you always got to call me? Why
Hmm.
can't you send me a text? That's
Right.
them, right?
Right.
And it's the same as like, because I want to hear your voice, right?
Right.
It's the why.
Yeah.
We need to look, that's with everything. We
Yeah.
need to be able to dig into the why
Yeah.
behind what things are happening. I'm going back to school. Here we go. As far as like there's way too many discipline referrals, right?
Hmm.
In
Mm.
school. Way
Mm.
too many. And sometimes if we just as educators
Hmm.
ask those students why
Why? Yeah.
something, and I'm not saying, but please don't misunderstand.
Right.
There are some serious reasons, that somebody got a referral and then consequences. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm talking about somebody's quiet, somebody fell asleep on their desk, whatever the case. I mean, I'm talking about, minor infractions. Sometimes when we ask why, we learn, oh,
Other.
well,
Yeah. Yep.
I was up late last night because, my baby sister was crying half the night or whatever, was sick and
Right.
was crying and I'm tired, and literally, that changes the whole
Oh, that
narrative,
it
right?
does. It
And
does.
so the same thing when we're back in, right? It's not related to discipline when we're just talking about youth in general. We just need to, why?
Right.
Why is that important to you?
Yeah.
And the same is to share that narrative with them, why it's important to
Important. Hmm.
why it's important. And I think we can move mountains when we do that.
Mm. I like how you just said that, because that diversity and how you say, breaking down stereotypes and things like that
Mhm.
has really been a part of the breakdown of the black family, if you will. Right.
Yes, yes, sure.
And I'm just curious though, are there other tools that maybe some of us are not aware of, that can help, maybe in your opinion, that you see that we can use to help repair, not only through communication, because I think
Mm.
communication is the key,
Oh, absolutely.
but
Hmm.
how do we use other tools to help improve or repair some of the disconnect that we see in our black family today?
Right. That's a pretty loaded question. And I think that, I mean, when you say tools, I'm thinking something external, but I think that the bottom line, I mean, I'm standing behind communication. Now, how you do that communication, whether it be with a counselor present, you know, with a pastor present, you know, but I think that that's where we go wrong, and maybe unpack tools for me a little bit more. But I think we go wrong where we leave that verbal communication with one another, right? Because think about back in the day, right? How did we solve our problems?
Oh, so we talked about we sat down at the
Until
table
it
and
was
we
fixed,
talked about it, right? We talked about it,
right?
respectfully, you
Right,
know.
respectfully, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? So what tools, just give me some ideas of what
Well,
thoughts you have there, and
well,
I'll respond to that.
well. So like when I say tools, right? So
Mhm.
meeting sometimes, and this is just me. I've always been I don't know, different when it came to when things aren't working, right? So get
Sure.
out of your comfort zone. So sitting
Yes.
down at the table, like we did, I remember
Mhm.
maybe that doesn't work for our youth today. So
Okay, got you.
go to the park, go to the mall.
Strategies. Okay,
Strategies, right?
okay, here
Create
we go.
some
Yes.
strategies
Uh-huh.
um that are outside the box, and it is really more uncomfortable maybe for me, because
Okay,
I'm not really comfortable wanting to go to the mall, right, and talking while you down with your head down on your phone, but you are responding back to me, but all I see is you
but
that right.
that's the truth though, but
But that's
that's
the
a
truth.
strategy.
It's a strategy, right? So same thing.
Yes.
Counseling, I think, is a great point, but that is a
Yes. There's not
huge
enough of that in our
right, and
communities.
that's a huge stereotype
Yes, it
in our
is.
community.
Mhm.
So how, like, I think counseling is great, therapy is
Mhm.
great.
Yes.
Um even and we talked about it, in the first conversation to the series, even in the church, we mentioned,
Mhm.
like I mentioned, I have I don't have the same faith, unfortunately, in the church.
Uh-huh,
And it's not
sure.
the church itself. A lot of times it's the head of the church,
Okay, right,
because
fair enough.
we see a lot of different things in the media, and I've come to understand the head of the
Yes.
church is a man just like me, so he makes faults,
Amen.
right? So
Mhm.
I try not to put all of that on him, but in our community, we've always put the church on such a high
Mm.
pedestal.
Ooh, that must be a good episode.
Yeah, I got to go back and So for me personally, and I walked away from some things from that conversation that have helped me look at it differently. But I'm just being honest.
No,
Sometimes
sure.
some people are not even comfortable going to the church anymore.
No, that's true. That's
So
very true. Mhm.
I trying to move outside of that. I don't know what other tools or strategies, because it's really, to me
Right.
today, we live in a world about strategy. How I'm
Mhm.
really big on, how do you meet today's
Right.
youth? How
Yeah.
do you meet them in a place really want, and I hate to say this, that's really comfortable for them, because the
Mhm.
mentality too is different. I
No,
don't
sure.
understand some of the mentality, and I want to be very sensitive here, but mental health is real.
I was just getting ready to
But
say
coming
yes.
up in my day and age,
Right.
what are you crying for? Boy,
Right.
if it
It's
ain't broke,
a different time.
or you bleeding,
Right.
get
Right.
up. You know what I'm saying? So,
Different
but
time. Mhm.
today's group is very sensitive,
Yes.
a little more sensitive to things that, for me, I'm looking at like, what's your problem? You
Right.
know,
Sure. Right.
so
And different times, right?
how do you maneuver that, and
Right.
strategize that? So
Well, first you don't say what's your problem.
what, right? It's true, and
No, I'm
like,
teasing you.
but
I'm
it's true.
teasing you.
Like, I
But
mean,
in your head, you're
in my
thinking that.
head, right? But that's not
Absolutely.
how I
So
came up.
I think that that's where I think you brought up some good points. So thank you for
Mhm,
unpacking that for
mhm,
me.
mhm,
So mental health is real.
mhm.
Mental health is real. It has exasperated itself through the pandemic. And I don't like to keep using the pandemic as
Right,
a
right,
reason for things, but it
right,
really did unearth a whole lot more.
right.
Like I said before, our political world that we've lived
Mhm,
in the last 7+ years
mhm.
has done that as well, right?
Right.
We're in a state of uncertainty as well as constant unrest, mental
Mhm.
unrest.
Yeah.
But back to your point, so I love the idea, like you said, if the person likes going to the mall and they're in their phone and
Mhm.
they can talk to you while they're in their phone and
Right.
walking to the mall, then
Right.
that's how you do it.
Right.
So we need examples though, and we need to understand what they want. So
Right.
it's a matter of asking, what's
Right.
something you'd like to do? Instead of me picking the
Right.
activity, why don't you tell me something you'd like to do?
Right.
You know what I mean? And
Right.
then go along with it, whatever
Hmm.
that case may be. So
Right.
that's going to be very open ended, and that involves that initial conversation.
Hmm.
But I think the other piece is, and I'm trying to think right away about some guiding questions
Hmm.
or whatever, because like you said, your mindset is, why are you crying? Like that's
Right.
just where you're at.
Right.
They're actually, in the moment.
In the moment. Right.
Right. Hmm,
You know,
it'll come to me. We'll put some things in the show
sure, sure.
notes,
That's right.
some links for people to go to, because there are various mental health supports, national and local, that people can use that have those exact questions. But the most important thing, is, like you said, to be empathetic,
Yeah.
which is hard, right?
It
That's
is.
not a skill that everybody has.
Mm-mm.
And so I do think of like Brene Brown's book, if people, that's a quick reference, Atlas of the Heart.
Heart. Uh-huh.
And so in that book, she's basically trying to help us understand empathy, self compassion. And naturally, once you learn those things for yourself, what I told you, we got to do our homework on
That's
ourselves.
right. That's right. That's right. And
But that's a good example, of then you can then give that to somebody else. But we'll get some things in the show notes for
I think
folks.
that's important, though. I think you really just hit the key, though.
Hmm.
Man, this has been a great conversation because it just helps bring to light a lot of things for me. Answering your own questions. Um,
Yes.
Start with yourself,
Oh,
because
yeah.
you really can't help someone until you've helped yourself.
That's it.
And that's really, I don't want to say it's just that simple, but
It
in
is
simple terms, right?
right in
In
simple
simple
terms.
terms,
Yes, sure, absolutely.
you still have to put in the work,
And that's it.
but in simple terms, you can't help someone else until you have. I think
Yeah.
I'm gonna put that pin in it right there because I
Okay.
think that helps. I think we've hit the nail on the head with that narrative right there. That's a perfect
Yes,
point.
indeed. Yes.
So, and this has been an amazing conversation, and we're coming to the end.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to ask you, you know, being so diverse, if
Mm-hmm.
are there any in in your opinion, is there a way that we can get back to cultural values? You
Mm,
know,
mm-mm.
cultural values. And
Yes.
if they are, like, how do you see, or in your opinion, share, how what can we do? Just maybe some simple points on trying to build a foundation to get back to some of our cultural values.
Yes. Well, you brought up a good point, excuse me, about where people are with the religion versus faith, and I
Mm-hmm.
and so I like to speak to faith
Mm-hmm.
as well. And I think that whatever it is, excuse me, whatever your faith
Mm-hmm.
is what you need to tune back into. First of
Mm.
all, we must
Mm.
start there, right? So
Mm-hmm.
even if it's right, just you're in tune with nature, if that's
Mm-hmm.
your faith, then that's what you need to do. We need to recenter ourselves,
Mm.
right, in our
Yeah.
foundations.
Mm.
That's always first and foremost. But then it really sometimes takes a moment to, like, for example, in our household, my husband and I, we established the values, right, before
Mm-hmm.
our children were born, right? And then when our children were born, then of course we go ahead and we instill those values within our families. But sometimes if you have not done that, or it's okay to revisit as a family,
Mm-hmm.
right, what are our family values? Because
Mm.
again, it starts right,
Yeah, here.
it starts here.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to find that you might be in this cloud, meaning like not like a word cloud,
That's
right?
right.
You might not all be right there on the target, but you're
Mm-hmm.
in the vicinity,
That's right.
right?
Right.
And then you want to see how you can merge those together so that they are shared values. I think the word
That's right.
is shared,
Yeah.
common, right?
Common. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Kind of shared. Once you do that, so that's an exercise,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? That's an activity to
That
do. as a
As a group, a shared activity as a family.
shared activity, right?
Hmm.
But then once you do that, right? I mean, we're just talking about our household,
Right. Right.
but now we're talking about as the Hamiltons or the Hlabangana's,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right? We
Right. Right.
got four.
Hmm.
We all
That's
have
right.
four families, right? And we extend that because I think that that is part of where we're going to become this one big family, because you and I are family, right?
That's
Even
right.
though we're
That's
sitting
right.
across the screen from each other, it's our first time interacting, face to face.
That's right.
We're family too, right?
That's right.
And so, how do we then come together? So, those are going to be examples of, oh goodness, the term went out of my head. Like, sorry,
Oh, it's okay.
it's like a forum, like where you, mm, anyway, you're going to have opportunities to come together virtually, in
Virtually. Yep.
person,
Hmm.
whatever, as a community, and be able to say
Hmm.
we need to discuss what our shared values
Values are. Hmm.
are, right?
Hmm.
And then go from there.
Yeah, and you're 100% right. I think that probably is the first step.
The first
Of like, and I like how you said recenter.
That's it.
Uh,
That's it.
recenter your not only yourself but your core.
Mm-hmm.
Which is generally your immediate family and your
Yes.
and set those principles.
Yes.
And then building on those principles,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of networking out or branching out, if you will, your
Yes.
external family, and
That's
having
it.
conversations and getting back to core values and beliefs that then become
Mm-hmm.
like a ripple effect,
That's
and,
it.
and I think that you really touched on it. I think that's a great way to really connect your family, because like I said, so many of us are family.
Yes,
You and I are family.
absolutely.
We're just meeting today,
Yes.
and this conversation and this
Mm-hmm.
discourse really helps you to get a better understanding of another person, who they
Yes.
are, hearing of who they
Yes.
are. And I think that, like I said, this really is what I hope people can use as a foundation,
Oh,
uh,
indeed.
to have conversation about, themselves, our history, our culture,
Mm-hmm.
some of the things that we talked about today, that they
Yes.
can walk away with and then try to implement. Hey, I saw on two mics up, or, the
That's
conversation,
right.
it's a spark.
It's
And
a
I think,
spark.
and I really hope that people walk away understanding this is just a spark,
Yes.
for
Yeah.
you to go ahead and feel empowered to want to do something positive to
Mm-hmm.
impact others. And I want to thank you
Oh,
for sitting here with me today. I want to thank our advertising partners, Riddick Entertainment, 94 Media House, TD3 Insurance Agency, for supporting and sponsoring today's Black History conversation. But
yeah.
before we go, Ann, I want to go ahead and make sure, please share your social media information. We're going to make sure we put that in the show notes. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to go out, really check out Ann, the work that she's doing, check out her podcast.
Oh,
And please take a moment, go ahead and share all your social media information. We'll make sure, like I said, we get that in the notes for our audience as well.
yes. Well, thank you so much. So, my podcast is coaching you through all things education. And so I'm not as up to date as two mics up, but we bring on various educators, administrators, etc., trying to unpack a topic that is of interest for our listeners. So really enjoy doing that. And then on my socials, you can, but my main socials probably are LinkedIn. You can find me on LinkedIn. So if you have my full name there on LinkedIn, you'll be able to send me a connection, and I'll be happy to reconnect with you somehow. And then on Twitter is actually my next one, uh, next most popular. So that is actually Oh my goodness. AHC underscore champ for all.
All right.
And that's because I'm a champion for all students and teachers and administrators, of course, across the nation. So thank you so much for having me on today. And this was really, I mean, it took a lot out of me in a good way,
Mhm.
right? Because we had some really powerful, conversation around history, right? Even though
Mhm.
we didn't think we were going down that road,
Right, right.
we had to relive our history a little bit in order to understand our present. But more importantly, we talked about the positive,
Yes,
right? We talked
yes.
about things that we want to see for our youth and for ourselves and
That's
for our
right.
future generations. And so, thank you so much for the work that you do each and
Thank you.
every day.
Thank
This
you.
has been very impactful.
Thank you so much, and it's been an honor for me to be able to sit with you. And like I said, today's conversation, we started out, we talked about it, R.I.D.
Yeah.
For those of you who, representation, identity, and diversity, and yes, and we really it was a very powerful conversation today.
Mhm.
We unpacked a lot of different things, but like I always want to make sure I hope that it really comes across as impactful because I want people to
Oh,
feel
indeed.
feel that they can walk away and do something positive to make a change. We live
Yes.
in such a negative world and such a
Mhm.
negative time. The hardest thing to do some days, even for myself, with everything that you watch and you see, is to wake up positive, to have a
Me
positive
too.
energy, to say that I can go out and do something that can help change, even if it's one person. If
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
just one, that's all that matters. You're doing what you're supposed to do. And I feel that's what I've been asked to do and called to do. So thank
Mhm.
you again, Ann. It's been an awesome, awesome conversation.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned for part three.
Oh,
Part three, you don't want to miss of this series. This Black History Month series, real talk, real
yes.
conversations with real people about real things that impact our community. Uh, you know, just another. I don't want to say walk in the park, but stay tuned. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be hot. And like we do on Two Mics Up, ladies and gentlemen, you can follow us across social media: IG, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Two Mics Up. You can always follow me, your man Dame the NYDC at Dame the NYDC on social media, all across, all of them except for YouTube. And look, just stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. And like we always do at this time, I wish that you all stay safe, stay blessed. Mike's out.
007.